Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 255. Thank you for joining us. Many of our listeners may know of Greg already from any of his 20 books, his radio show, or as a founder of CatholicCounselors.com, the Pastoral Solutions Institute, or of the website and app CatholicHôM.com. In addition to all of this experience, Greg is a homeschooling father himself and has a great deal of wonderful advice on the challenges of balancing the normal challenges of family life with the added stress of homeschooling. He also provides some advice for students who may be interested in a future as a Catholic counselor. Be sure to check out all of the useful links in the show notes. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Doing very well. Spring is just around the corner here, I think, in the southern part of the Midwest, at least, where we're at.
Yep. Here, too. It's pretty windy, actually. And we're just still waiting for that last little bit of winter, which I hesitate to say that in front of our guest today because he lives in a place where winter is no joke compared with where we are. Our guest today is someone who many of our listeners are likely to recognize, with more than 20 books to his credit, a daily call-in radio show on EWTN, and an app for Catholic families. He just might be someone whose wisdom and guidance many of us have benefited from. Dr. Greg Popcak, welcome to the Kolbecast.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's pretty here, too, for what it's worth.
Oh, good. I hope it lasts for you and doesn't turn around and surprise you with one last hurrah of the winter. Yeah.
Your mouth to God's ears.
Yes, may it be so. Well, it's really a pleasure to meet you today. As I mentioned, you have a lot of books to your credit, some of which I have here at home and have appreciated. A lot of what you have had to offer us over the years has really been something I've incorporated and taken to heart and enjoyed your radio show. I think so. This will date us both, so you're welcome. At the early part of my motherhood, my eldest child is a sophomore in college now. When I was a new mom, it was this whole newfangled internet radio thing. I was very delighted to get some Catholic content because we did not yet have a Catholic radio station in our area. And so I was grateful to catch your show with your wife, Lisa. So that has been with me for a long time. So I'll stop talking, though. Will you please tell us about yourself and your background, a bit of your homeschooling experience and so forth?
Sure. Well, you start with that first, I guess. So Lisa and I are homeschooling parents going way back. So we, in fact, we just stopped homeschooling this last year because our youngest went off to college. So Lisa has been homeschooling for, I guess, about 30 years. So yeah, and we've been very involved in the homeschooling community over the last several decades, really. So. But in 1999, I started our practice, CatholicCounselors.com, because my first book, For Better Forever, A Catholic Guide to Lifelong Marriage, had come out. And I was starting to get calls from folks around the country looking for faithful places to turn for counseling. And I didn't have any place to send them because really then there weren't a lot of options when it came to Catholics in the counseling area. So I thought, all right, well, this will be my bit for the church. I'll see 2 or 3 clients a week or something, and it'll accent my private practice already that I had. And then within 6 months, I had to close the practice because we were getting so many calls. We've grown now to, I have 20 full-time pastoral counselors that work with me. We do over 30,000 sessions a year with Catholic individuals, couples, and families around the world.
Amazing.
So the 20 books and then the EWTN daily radio program, it keeps us busy.
I'd say, and I left out CatholicCounselors.com, which is something we have you to thank for. I'm so glad and grateful for all you have contributed. It's really a tremendous blessing to us. Will you take us back a little bit to those early days of getting going with the internet ministry? Really, you have had.
Oh gosh! So again, this is 1999, and really, since people were calling from all over the place, I was doing work on the telephone, and I had done some writing for, at the time, desktop publishing was a thing, right? So
Right.
coming out with zines, and I'd written for a couple of different parenting zines, and was getting calls from that. So I was used to doing some sessions over the phone. And so that just took off at that point. And so we really started focusing on just the Catholic integration of counseling and theology, and really trying to present in an ethical and effective way, how could we help our clients live more faithful and authentic Catholic lives in the face of the challenges that they were encountering. So that it just really grew from there to as I said, 20 books. And then in 2000, well, we had actually around that same time we did a TV series for EWTN called For Better Forever, titled after the book. It was a marriage series that we did. Um, and it's funny, a lot of the people who are now in executive leadership at EWTN were couple guests on the show, kind of interviewing them as couples at the time. But yeah, so then in I think it was 2001, Al Cresta from who's passed on now, but who was the director of Ave Maria Radio, reached out to Lisa and I and asked if we'd be willing to host a show. And at first I thought he meant like, something weekly. And it was like, no, a daily show for an hour. It was terrifying. So, if anybody ever wants to know what it's like to host live radio, call up somebody you know isn't at home and talk to their voicemail for an hour. Uh, so takes some getting used to. So, but yeah, so in fact, mercifully, we did get calls, and so that always helps. But so yeah, no, and we've done that then since 2001. So this is almost, we're coming up on our 25th year. We actually for a time hosted two shows. So we had our show for Ave Maria Radio. This was before it was picked up by EWTN, and then we did a second show for the Catholic channel on Sirius XM from 10 to midnight.
Oh, goodness.
And it was a whole bunch of truckers, and Archbishop Naumann were the only people that I knew that listened, because they were the only people who called in. um, so we did that for about 3 years, but then we went back to just doing the one show, and the EWTN picked us up about 7-8 years ago, and the rest is history, I guess.
What's it like to do a daily show? I imagine you hear many of the same question. How do you approach that and meet people where they are in that moment? I mean, for them,
well, we have a different theme every day. Okay. So we have a different theme every day. So it even if we get similar questions, since the themes are different, it mixes it up. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, on those days where we're doing a show and we've, I can anticipate what the questions are going to be. But it's not, I mean, even though the questions might be similar, the contexts are very different and the stories behind them are very different. And so each call is very different.
It's amazing how you zero in on what the issue is with the limited time you have, how you're able to get to that. That's impressive.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
You
certainly try.
You do a good job of it. Do you have any standout memories from your time spent from your homeschool era? Like, what stands out? Any favorite or cautionary tales you want to leave with us?
No, I mean, there isn't a specific instance that kind of comes to mind. Probably I'll think about it 10 minutes later. I'll think, this is what I should have done. Right. But I guess, the thing for us that really made homeschooling special was, especially doing the ministry work that we do, we traveled a lot. And we would not have been able to bring our kids with us if we didn't homeschool. And so being able to travel with the kids and still keep them in school, so to speak, and let them have those other experiences traveling really around the world was just wonderful. And I think, it's just one of the most important parts of their education and one of the most important parts of us being a family. And so I really am grateful for the opportunities that homeschooling gave us to be able to share all those other experiences as well.
Yeah. With your own experience as a homeschooling dad and from your many years of walking with homeschooling parents and counseling them, what are some of the insights you have taken away from that? When you're in front of a group of homeschoolers, what have you learned from them? What do you find with them? Those sorts of things.
I mean, well, the homeschooling families in general are terrific. We really love working with them, and I think they're really passionate families who love their kids and really want to do their best by their kids. I think there are a couple of things that homeschooling families, some are more aware of than others, but I think that we try to help every family be more aware of. The first thing is that homeschooling will ramp up your family dynamic by about 100-fold, whatever it is. So if it's good, it's going to help your family be great. If it's struggling, it's going to raise some issues really pretty quickly, which can also be good because a lot of times families ignore problems by just staying busy. And I think homeschooling families have less of an opportunity to do that. You either face your stuff or you're not going to be homeschooling for very long. Secondly, I think the other dynamic that people miss is that homeschooling families actually have more of a dynamic that's common with two career families. than with traditional stay-at-home mom families. Because if mom tries to do all the home education alongside of all the other stuff that traditional stay-at-home moms do, she's going to burn out pretty quickly. And so families who are successful, more or less, I mean, obviously every story is a little different, but families who successfully manage homeschooling tend to divide up labor the way a two-career family will, where they see mom's job as primarily being the home educator, and then everything else gets managed between the husband and wife, and then just like any other two-career family would. And I see a lot of families, a lot of moms in particular, who are burning out because they feel like they have to do everything, and they somehow have to do algebra and spelling and everything in between the dishes and the laundry and the running around and the everything, and it's a real shortcut to burnout. So I think people needing to be aware of that is really important, both of those things.
Yes, and it's one of the things I found, because we started out as a parochial school family and then went to homeschooling, I found that we had more of time to see each other sort of in our fullness, our good and bad, not bad, but the whole range of us, as opposed to at the end of a school day, everybody at that point was at kind of a low point of energy and ability to interact well with each other. So at least we get more of the time when we are each a bit fresher, but at the same time, that comes with a whole range of.
Well, yeah, and I guess you mentioned that the third thing that we usually tell people who are asking about whether they should homeschool or not. The third thing is realizing that schooling kids actually, for the most part, withdraws from the emotional bank account. So we had a lot of parents who will say, "Well, I spent the whole day with my kids," but they don't get any credit for that because they're actually asking their kids to do work, and so it doesn't actually add to the emotional bank account. It's making sure that we're spending time building relationship and building family life on top of the school work that we're doing, which can be a little intimidating, when you've spent all day trying to school your kids and you just want to break. But just being aware of that is really important too.
Would you say a bit more about that emotional bank account concept?
Yeah, well, so there's research by John Gottman, who is a big figure in marriage counseling. He's kind of his work is kind of the gold standard for what counts as effective marriage therapy research, and it actually applies to all relationships really. And so he talks about how the happiest couples, and again this applies to really all relationships, maintain a 20-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. And then when in daily life, and then in conflict, they tend to maintain a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions, which sounds weird because how do you maintain a positive ratio when you're arguing with somebody? And basically what it comes down to is you have more of a problem solving mindset about it. Instead of attacking each other, it's like, I'm being honest about my frustrations, but I'm seeing you as my partner and trying to solve this instead of blaming you for it and attacking you. So, but in general, when we talk about the emotional bank account, it's that idea of that 20-to-1 ratio or that 5-to-1 ratio. It's that's what enables us to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. If I know that 48 times out of 50, you're looking out for me and you're trying to take care of me and you have, and I can see that you have my best interest at heart. Those other 2 times when you kind of step in it and I'm not sure where you're coming from, I'm willing to give you some credit, But you start playing around with that ratio and now it's, 10-to-1 or 5-to-1 or whatever in the daily relationship, but lower than that, then I'm not so sure where you're coming from, right? And then you start getting defensiveness is kind of the first thing that pops up, where if you're in the habit of neglecting that emotional bank account, you're looking for your keys and you're in the hallway and you're muttering under your breath. It's like, where the heck are my keys? And all of a sudden, your spouse from the other room pops up. I didn't take your keys, like I wasn't even talking to them, right? But there's this sort of atmosphere of tension in the house where we're just programmed to react to each other because we don't know where we're coming from. So if you're neglecting that emotional bank account and not really working hard to look for little ways to make each other's day a little easier and more pleasant throughout the day, it comes back to bite you, in just your regular conversation. And then when you do have something to disagree about, it escalates pretty quickly. And that's one of the first things we try to look at in the pastoral counseling practice when folks call us for marriage counseling, is, this, how is this ratio playing out in your relationship? And, people kind of, they pick on us, we're paying you all this money just to tell us to be nice to each other. And it's really more than that, but that's it. But it starts there, with the, how are you looking to try to take care of each other to maintain that 20-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions, so that when you do get into it, you can give each other the benefit of the doubt without having to work too hard about it.
Yeah. Okay. And then with the kids, how do you see that, like, working that, applying that then to the homeschooling parents and interacting with their kids then?
Well, yeah, because again, keeping in mind that homeschooling, is work, for you and for the kids, and it's withdrawing from the emotional bank account in the sense that I'm asking them to do something for me. I'm you know, I'm having to stay on top of them to get their work done, and I'm having to say, oh, you did that wrong, please do it again, and and some critique their work. That's all draining on that emotional bank account. So making sure that we're looking for little ways to be affectionate throughout the day, to make sure that we're complimenting the efforts that they are making, that recognizing the things they are doing well. Taking time to play together, looking for those little opportunities to really just kind of make an emotional connection to help offset the amount of critiquing or kind of pulling out of them that I have to do. It's just, because we can get into that kind of reactive place, especially, if I'm that homeschooling parent who's trying to homeschool in between doing all the other chores, then it's like I'm constantly irritated because I can't focus on any one thing. So then I end up criticizing constantly. And then my kids are sullen and angry, and I don't know why. And I just chalk it up to them being willful and disobedient. But really, they're just mad at me, and they're trying to let me know that they're upset. But I'm too busy to listen to that, and then I just write them off again as willful, and so it just becomes this ugly cycle. So, if I'm not paying attention to that emotional bank account, then it tends to lead to angry, sullen, resentful, defiant kids, and it's just too easy to write that up to them being broken somehow, instead of recognizing that the brokenness is really in the relationship.
Yeah. And when it's a parent-child dynamic, it would seem that uh, sort of the onus to fill the bank, to maintain the bank account balance, is, at least for parents of younger, anyway, it's more on the parents, I would think, to contribute to that than to. That's less of a back and forth with a spousal dynamic, I would think. So that's
no, that's true. But I think, well, yeah, that's right. So, and I think we need to remember that, because I think that we can get into that place where, oh, these kids, don't they appreciate everything I do for them? And I think we do need to teach our kids to give back. I think that's in fact one of the things that we really teach on the CatholicHôM app, is how do we help our kids give back to the good of the family based on their age and stage and what they're capable of. But we do, as parents, need to realize that we're teaching our kids how to have relationship in the first place, which means that we have to be the ones who are making the biggest contribution to the relationship in order to maintain it, and to teach kids how to have them.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, as you're talking about that, I was thinking how important it is to. I was going through my checklist here to get little habits. It seems like it's really important, because if you're talking about a 20-to-1 ratio, and you're, like you're saying, busy with homeschooling, taking care of the house, marriage, relationship, all of that as well. If you just have to one off every day, think, okay, I need to do something nice for my child or something connecting, it seems like that's going to be one of the first things that slips your mind. So if you don't have some sort of practice, some sort of habits, some sort of rituals, even
rituals. Well, I think and that's another important thing. Routines and rituals are a really critical part of any family life. I think it's the first thing that tends to go, because we're all busy and overscheduled. So we have a tendency to not have any routines or rituals, and that leads to a lot of chaos too. You can think of routines as kind of the current that runs through the house and carries everybody along with it. So for example, morning routines or bedtime routines, like there's a certain time that bedtime starts, and a certain order to that bedtime, and then we all do the things together, and we kind of carry each other through. Same thing with laundry day, or how we even if it's multiple days, we do it on certain days in certain ways, and as opposed to what a lot of families end up doing, they're too busy to have a laundry day, so we just do laundry whenever we feel like it. Or we don't have a regular bedtime because everybody's overscheduled, and then it's just a constant fight because nobody knows what to expect. And it only happens when, say, the parent feels like it should happen, and the kids are like, "Well, why should it happen now? I don't feel like it should happen." As opposed to it, when you have those routines, then it's, well, this is just what we do, and it carries us along in the current of the family. And then rituals, we another thing we talk about on Home, in addition to CatholicHôM, I mean the app, in addition to routines, is regular rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying together every day. And building that into the day, so it's not just something I have to remember to do. It's that this is part of the order of my family life, that we work and play and talk and pray in these various ways every day. And that can be 5-10 minutes each. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment, but there's an expectation that we're doing it. And that's what creates the space to have those things that contribute to the emotional bank account automatically happen, as opposed to me having to remind myself, oh, I need to do something nice for my kid today, which is, like you said, it's the first thing to go whenever I'm busy. But if I have a rhythm that I've built into my family life, and we've got these routines and we've got these rituals that create that space for family prayer, for working together, for taking some time to talk and reflect together, for taking a little bit of time to have fun and play with each other. We've built that in, and that creates a structure that facilitates the warmth that's necessary. By the way, all the research really shows that if I want to raise faithful kids, they have to experience the faith as a source of the warmth in my home growing up. And it's only to the degree that they can say that, or that we can say that, that anything else sticks, including weekly mass attendance, Catholic education, youth ministry, you name it. If the kids aren't experiencing the faith as the source of the warmth in the home, then nothing else matters.
Speaking of CatholicHôM, you've mentioned it in passing a few times now. Would you tell us about CatholicHôM and how it came to be, and what it all means and all that?
Yeah, so there's kind of a story behind that. So in 2019, before the pandemic and before everybody was even thinking about domestic church stuff, we were working with the OSV Institute on a parenting initiative that they created to renew Catholic family life. And so the first thing we did was we hosted a symposium at Notre Dame that had about 50 theologians, social scientists, pastoral ministry folks. We had the executive team from the USCCB, Secretariat for Marriage and Family Life there as well. And we were just looking at, what would it take to renew Catholic family life? And one of the first questions we were looking at is, what does Catholic spirituality in the family even look like? Because, most of, and this is a big question, because most of what we think of as Catholic spirituality is actually drawn from the monastic and clerical traditions and doesn't tend to fit very neatly into family life. And it was only in the Second Vatican Council, when it declared the universal call to holiness, that they started saying, well, everybody should be holy, not just religious, not just clergy and religious. But with that, it sort of stopped there. They just kind of kept trying to put new wine into old wineskins by saying things like, well, families can pray the liturgy of the hours. Well, and of course we can, but how many of us really do, at least consistently, right? And so the question really we wanted to start with, what does a domestic church spirituality even look like? That would treat family life, the craziness, the busyness, the scatteredness of family life as a feature, not a bug of Catholic spirituality. And kind of out of that, then we started asking a lot of other questions too about, how Catholic theology should order our relationships in the home, and what do the social science research say about passing the faith on to our kids, and that kind of stuff. So out of that came this framework that we came to call the Liturgy of Domestic Church Life. And we believe it's actually the liturgy by which a quote unquote common family becomes a dynamic domestic church. When you talk about the term domestic church, people hear it, but it really was never defined. Even if you look in the Catechism, it says that domestic church is a specific manifestation of ecclesial reality. Which, okay, awesome, but what does that mean to me? And so, through our work, we kind of had to define, what is a domestic church and how do you become one? And so, and it had to be, on the one hand, a definition inclusive enough to include all Catholic households, but not so broad that it didn't mean anything. And so we identified, that a domestic church was a household of persons that shared sacrament, that were united to God and each other through the sacramental life of the church in some way, but then also united in trying to live out the Christian, specifically Trinitarian vision of love in their relationships with each other in the world. And well, so how do you do that? And that's where this liturgy of domestic church life came about. So the idea of a liturgy, we usually think about that happening at church, right? Because that's where the liturgy of the Eucharist happens. So in order for something to be a liturgy, God has to institute it. right? So nobody invented a way to turn bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. Jesus had to do that. And then secondly, a liturgy is intended to heal the damage that sin does to our relationships with God and each other. So the liturgy of the Eucharist, instituted by Christ, is intended to heal the damage that sin did to our ability to enjoy eternal life and heal the damage that sin did to our ability to have communion with each other. Well, in a similar way, this liturgy of domestic church life, families didn't invent themselves. God created family at the beginning of time, right? And he built into the family, his design of the family, certain practices that when families do them, they function well. And united with his grace, they're holy. And if you look at the social science literature, there are certain things that all families throughout time and across cultures do in one way or another. They can look very different from household to household or culture to culture, but categorically, these things are there. And so we looked at those things, and this is the liturgy that God built into his design of family life, so that it could heal the damage that sin does to society at the root. The basic root of civilization in the church is the family. And so when families do these things, it turns out there are basically 12 practices that we identified, that they are more equipped to cooperate with God's grace to be a happy and healthy family, and united with his grace, experience family life as a little way of holiness in the home. So this is the framework that became this liturgy of domestic church life. And then we started teaching this to diocesan family life directors and parish ministers. And then we were invited in 2022 to do the opening keynote at the Vatican World Meeting of Families on the liturgy of domestic church life. And at that meeting, we launched CatholicHôM, because we've been teaching this for about 3 years. And the feedback that we were getting was, "This is awesome. We love this. This is great. It's so practical. It's so simple. But the but was that most dioceses don't even have a family life office. The ones that don't have any infrastructure for actually doing family ministry. They have one person in an office and nobody in the diocese to actually carry out anything. There's no money. There's no time. So we were getting feedback. Can you create some kind of resource that we can use?" And that's what led to CatholicHôM. It's CatholicHôM. It stands for Households on Mission, and it's an app. The main thing about the app, though, is that it's not an app like, say, other apps where it's just static content that you have to remember to go to. It's an app that actually provides coaching. So Lisa and I and our whole team of pastoral counselors are on the app interacting with parents every day. So if you have a parenting question, a discipline question about living your faith at home, a question about marriage, really. So any marriage or family or parenting, family faith question is fair game. You can ask at any time as much as you want, get not just an answer to that question, but ongoing follow-up feedback on that. It's not intended to replace counseling at all. It's really much more kind of frontline first aid kind of answers to kind of keep families on track. But then so that's the main feature. The second thing I would say is we're teaching families to live this liturgy of domestic church life in their everyday lives. And then we're producing creative content to make that happen as well. So we have monthly downloadable activities that we put out, usually one on a family topic and one on a faith topic. We have exclusive podcast content. So I do the Beatitudes for Catholic men. Lisa does Momfidence for Catholic women. And then together we do CatholicHôM for all of our subscribers. We actually have an animated series that we did for Family Theater Productions. It's 6 15-minute animated shorts. So the cartoon family that you see whenever you look at the CatholicHôM app, they kind of walk through this whole thing. And, it gives families a chance to learn this liturgy of domestic church life together. So it's not the parents trying to teach the kids. The parents and kids are really learning it together with activities they can do and discussion questions. It's just basically a comprehensive wraparound family formation program. That really teaches the unique vision of Catholic family life and then supports families in living it out through the coaching. So we're really excited about the resource and the feedback that we're getting from parents. We did a poll early on that found about 85% of regular users experience significant positive changes in their family within 2 weeks of using the resource. So we're excited.
It was great hearing the starting point and kind of how it works. The app dimension of it, I think, I was kind of stuck on it. So great hearing how that all comes together.
Yeah, and the subscription is it's just one subscription for both mom and dad, and then all the kids get to use all the resources on, the fun stuff on it too. So try to make it as affordable as possible for families, and mom and dad can both ask questions, and we just want to really make it available. We have a partnership with the National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities. So for families with children who have disabilities, we have a special place for those families to kind of come together and talk about how to use these resources and live this liturgy out, in the presence of their kids who are struggling with different disabilities. And so it's, we're really trying to make this as accessible to everybody as possible too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. Well, I mean, some of the things that I've been thinking of as you've been talking is how difficult the environment is today. Because I think back to my parents' generation growing up in rural Wisconsin, where families stayed together. They stayed in the community. People weren't leaving, going off. Even if they went to school, people were going to the same church every Sunday, and you'd see your family there. And now everybody, I'm sure you have this experience with your last one, just all of your children no longer homeschooling. And I'm in the middle of that right now, as is Bonnie. So do you see that as having a huge, providing or presenting an extra challenge that maybe wasn't there? I mean, I'm sure it was still there, but not.
You mean the culture in general to family life?
Yeah. Yeah. Just families being scattered, families being pulled in different directions.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I don't think unquestionably, I think that this is going back a ways here, but when the communists took over Poland, for example, one of the first things they tried to do was pull families apart. So the state was going to replace the family, and St. John Paul fought against that by requiring parents, for example, to be at altar boy practice, because he was going to make sure they got at least an hour a week together. Little subversive things to try to help the family stay together. But what the communists did to families, we're just volunteering. We're giving up family. We're surrendering our family life to the community, to all the activities that our kids are doing, and we're blowing apart our own families out of our free will. I think homeschooling families have a real advantage here because we kind of stand in contrast to that, saying that family life is important. I mean, I think on some level, every homeschooling family homeschools because they believe that family life is important. We don't always do it perfectly well or as well as we'd like, but I think there's that underlying idea that family life is something to be prioritized and preserved. And that's the first step. I mean, that's actually the first practice in this liturgy of domestic church life, prioritizing family time. Because if we don't have time to be a family, then we don't have time to mentor our children and teach them how to live Christian lives. So, if I've got 4,000 activities scheduled for Wednesday, because I'm afraid of missing out, then I'm missing out on the most important thing, how to be a person and relate to other people and have relationship. So I think that this is a real opportunity for homeschooling families, especially who might be learning this liturgy of domestic church life or participating in CatholicHôM, to really be a witness to other families and be able to articulate their experience more effectively to other families of why this is working. That it's not the homeschooling per se. It's the fact that choosing this lifestyle gives us an opportunity to prioritize family relationship. And that's what's working. So even those families who can't homeschool per se can still make efforts to prioritize family life and create rituals of connection in family life and do the things that we've been talking about, prioritizing affection and affirmation, another one of the practices in the liturgy. I think this gives homeschooling families especially a way to explain what they're already doing to a large degree, do a little bit better and more intentionally, and support each other in really living and communicating this kind of unique vision of family life. It's not at all insular, but really very communal, I guess, for one better way to put it.
You have made reference to several statistics along the way. Is there more that you want to say about research that you have undertaken and drawn from in developing this?
Yeah, well, so I kind of tip my hand by sharing some of the results of this, but last year we sponsored a study through the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown, where we were looking at we wanted to validate the framework. So all the different practices that make up this liturgy of domestic church life were drawn from the social science literature, but it was kind of a grab bag sort of a thing. We put it together based on what we've seen. We wanted to see if the framework actually held up. So what we did was we looked at families that successfully raised all of their kids to a faithful adulthood. So first we looked at families in general and tried to look at, well, how successful are families in raising faithful kids? And that's where we found that we lose 85% of our kids. So then from that, we looked for the families that did successfully raise all of their kids to a faithful adulthood and said, well, what's wrong with these people? Why are they successful? And we interviewed both the parents and the adult children. So and a lot of these adults, they were all different ages. So some of the adult children were college age kids. Others were, with going to church weekly with their own families. But all of them were serious and devout Catholics who attended Mass regularly, weekly. And as we interviewed them, we found these 12 habits that make up this liturgy of domestic church life kind of coming out in the conversations. And them feeling that they did these things more than other families that they knew that maybe didn't have quite as much success. So I don't mean to suggest that we've identified the silver bullet for raising faithful kids or a guarantee in any way, because free will certainly begins. But I think that we've found probably one of the most concrete, practical, doable answers to what does it take to raise faithful kids in this framework, or the liturgy of domestic church life, based on the research that we did then, that identified those practices that lead to the kind of warm household that makes kids want to own their faith. One of the things that kind of stands out when you interview faithful adult kids is they'll point to the fact that their parents maybe had more rules than their friends did, or they had more expectations than their friends' families did. But they were okay with that because they saw how those rules actually contributed to a more warm and loving household. Compared to families where they had the rules but they didn't have the warmth, those kids kind of couldn't run far enough away, from faith. So it's really all about, it's not enough to have a warm household. It's not enough to have a faithful household. Your kids really have to, for the research, really have to see how those two things go together and how the faith directly contributes to the warmth. The stuff that families do, but finding a way to connect that with, we're doing this because our faith asks us to take this time, or we have these expectations or rules because God wants us to learn how to love each other. And this is what's helping us do that, and our kids kind of experience that. When you're hugging your kids and you make the sign of the cross in their heads and you tell them, as much as I love you, Jesus loves you even more. I mean, those little kinds of simple, practical things that just make such a big difference. And so all of that, like you talked about, Stevie, it's kind of been lost. Even devout families don't know how to be family because we learn how to be family from our culture. And, a lot of us come from divorce households or blended or other households where, family kind of fell apart. We don't have that experience. Or even if we did come from intact families, there's a lot of pressure to not be family. It feels selfish, and weird. Like, why are you going to be the family that doesn't do anything and just sits in your house and stares at each other all day? What's wrong with you? And so, even intact families that came from intact families feel the pressure to just give up family life. And so we wanted to create CatholicHôM as a place for families to come together and learn that it was okay to prioritize their relationships and to make time to take care of each other and learn to do those things that help them experience the faith as the source of the warmth in the home.
So going back a bit to some of your earlier comments about the instances when burnout presents itself, what might you say to someone coming to some recognition after hearing you kind of walk through all this, like, oh, that's me? What would be kind of a first step you would suggest to them?
So you're going to touch on, you use the word burnout, and I think that's a good word for it. I hope that kind of gets to the heart of what you're getting at it. But the burnout is work minus meaning.
Okay.
Right. So at the point where I stop feeling like the work I'm doing is meaningful, that's when I start feeling burned out. And there are lots of reasons for that. But the number one reason is a lack of connection. Right. So if a lot of times I feel burned out because I don't have the connection. It's not so much the work. It's somehow I don't feel like this is helping me lead to a better relationship with my kids or with my spouse. This is just one more thing that's getting in the way.
Okay.
So I would suggest, and this is, going to require everybody to kind of figure out their own thing here. So I appreciate the limitations of what I'm about to say, but really what you have to ask yourself is give yourself permission to do what you're doing differently. I think a lot of people think that homeschooling has to be done this way, or these, whatever, keeping my house has to be done this way. Like we actually did a show on this, kind of a both and approach as opposed to an either or approach to getting our needs met. So, for example, a lot of parents feel like I have to sacrifice all my needs to take care of my kids. That's just the way it has to be done. Um, and and it is good to obviously prioritize our kids' needs. I'm not suggesting that, but it's not an either or. One of the things the theology of the body helped to clarify was that God gave us our needs in order for us to thrive. And Catholic social teaching teaches us that the common good requires that everybody who has needs get those needs met in some way. So the question isn't, are you allowed to have needs, or are you allowed to get your needs met? It's a question of how do we work together to get those needs met, right? And so, we don't negotiate the what the needs are. We negotiate the how and the when, so that we can come up with a time and a time frame and a plan to get the what met, if you will, the needs met. So by negotiating the how and the when, but not the what, we can avoid burnout because I'm able to say, let's come up with a plan here that actually meets my needs. We'll just kind of play around with the how and the when so that we can do all the stuff that needs to be done in a way that actually works for me. A lot of times when we experience burnout, either in family life or homemaking or homeschooling, it's because we've become too rigid about it needs to be done this way. But this way isn't working for us. It's not leading to better relationships. It's not helping me feel closer to my kids, or my kids feel closer to me, or my spouse and I feeling closer to each other. It's just making me hate everybody. But I have to do it to be a good Catholic person. It's like, no. Do it give yourself permission to do it in a different way. And if you're not quite sure what that looks like, well, that's what, CatholicCounselors.com is here for. We'll coach you through some of those things, but give yourself permission to start looking at least at the question of how could I do this in a way that would actually lead me closer to my spouse and my kids.
Okay. All right. Well, in the time that we have left with you, Dr. Popcak, I would love to switch gears quite dramatically here for a second and get your advice for aspiring counselors and mental health professionals. How would you advise those who are aspiring to such work?
So I'll tell you, so when I'll answer this by describing a little bit about our hiring process too, because it kind of goes to the training that you really need to do this work. So when I bring on a counselor to CatholicCounselors.com, I never hire anybody directly. I admit them to our training program, right? And it involves sort of three things. First of all, I want to make sure that they've got, their basic mental health counseling credentials, right? So if you're an aspiring counselor, go to the best school and, that you can and get the best counseling skills you can, seek out the best internship opportunities and get your license. So that's number one, just do a good job, basic foundational skills. Secondly, I kind of walk my people through learning about the theology of the body, because St. John Paul developed the theology of the body, not, as a lot of people think, just to specifically focus on a Catholic vision of sexuality, but to communicate what he called, quote unquote, an adequate anthropology. So a Catholic vision of the person. What does it mean to be a healthy, thriving Catholic person? That's ultimately what the theology of the body is about. And so counselors need to have a good anthropological vision, because whether they articulate it or not, when you go to counseling, they're trying to coach you to be a certain kind of person. And so, having that clear vision of, how does the Catholic person think about personhood and fulfillment? And what does it mean to be in relationship to others? The theology of the body teaches that vision, so that in everything that we do at CatholicCounselors.com, we have that theology of the body framework that allows us to be able to say, okay, this is what we as Catholics believe a thriving, fulfilled person in healthy relationship looks like. And then thirdly, it's really important to know how to integrate your faith and your work ethically and effectively. And so there's a whole framework developed by Dr. Ken Pargament, who was both a clinician and a professor at Bowling Green University. He wrote a book called Spiritually Integrated Psychotherapy that talks about how you can conceive of problems using kind of a spiritual framework as opposed to just a clinical framework, and how to integrate whatever your spiritual tradition is both spiritual resources, spiritual reading, spiritual relationships, spiritual activities into the counseling process, so that you can take full advantage not just of counseling techniques, but your spiritual traditions and understandings as well. So being able to integrate that in a really systematic way, as opposed to just sort of I'm a Catholic and I'm a counselor, and I sort of try to put that together in my own sort of way. There's a lot of research behind this spiritually integrated psychotherapy approach that enables people to do that well. And so all of our counselors at CatholicCounselors.com have all three of those elements: that basic professional foundation, the theology of the body preparation, and then that ability to do integration through that spiritual psychotherapy model.
Okay.
Are there particular schools out? I mean, you said go find the best school for counseling. Are there some Catholic programs?
Yeah, so well, you're right. So I mean, and when I say best, that's a tricky kind of a word, because especially if you want to be a Catholic counselor, most counseling programs are pretty secular. So I would say your usual suspects of Franciscan University, Divine Mercy University does good graduate preparation. Your Newman schools, generally speaking, have solid psychology programs for at least undergraduate. So I mean, the field gets a little more narrow whenever you're starting to look at graduate programs. I think the only ones right now are Franciscans and Divine Mercies that I'm aware of. I could be wrong about that, but trying to choose those programs that provide both the best integration of faith and psychology, and really, especially in the graduate level, give you good opportunities for internships, because that's where you really learn everything. In grad school, it's really about your internship possibilities. So some of those schools have better internship opportunities than others that I mentioned.
Okay. Well, you've been at the forefront of this Catholic mental health support for a while now, and it's something I know I'm grateful for, and I imagine many of our listeners are as well. As we're coming to the end of our time together, I want to make reference to the show notes for this episode. We'll have links to CatholicHôM, to CatholicCounselors.com, and to relevant links in Kolbecast episodes. Are there any other resources or recommendations that you would like to include?
No, other than the fact that at CatholicCounselors.com, we don't just have, information about our practice. We have a whole kind of DIY section with self-help videos and articles and lots of stuff to do there. So, even if you're not interested in counseling per se, going there and kind of learning more about different topics from a Catholic perspective, it's a great place to turn for those resources.
Okay, great. So any final thoughts or takeaways?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate the work that Colby does, and I appreciate your podcast and the opportunity to really talk more with homeschooling families. As I said, who have a real affinity for homeschooling families. We've been a homeschooling family for really our entire adult lives, practically. Yeah. And really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys today.
This is just kind of a selfish statement here, I guess, from things that I'd always thought about counseling more as people who need help. And obviously that's, the primary goal, but more and more, especially hearing people like yourself speak, or people who have come on the Kolbecast, I've realized what a blessing your resources, the things that you're providing, are for people where things are going pretty well, I think, overall for, in our family and things. But to see, like, these are the things that cause problems. These are the things that you can do to help this. It's like a roadmap to get into some of the details where things it was like, oh yeah, we're kind of doing that, but now I can be more intentional about it. So I really appreciate what you're doing, not just for the people who really need somebody to step in and help, but for all of us that we could use a little bit more guidance. And I love the research, it's not just here's always the best, here's what I think is what you should do, but you've also given us, like, we've done studies, we've got the data I just love it. And so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
we work hard to do, it's important to me if I'm going to represent, the church, right, and what we do. And we do, so CatholicCounselors.com actually is an official recognized ministry of the church. We're in the official Catholic directory. We're recognized by the USCCB. We're under the authority of our bishop for our fidelity. So if I'm going to represent the church in what we do, I want to make sure that it's not just my opinion saying, yeah, this is what all parents should do, and to base it on the best research that's available that says this is what works. This is what people who are successful at whatever do, and this is how it relates to our faith. And so thank you. I'm glad that came across, and I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, we are looking forward to visiting with your wife, Lisa, on an upcoming episode of the Kolbecast, and appreciate all of what you and she have done together in tandem with your team and everything you have devoted all these many years, and appreciate this time you spent with us. Dr. Popcak, thanks so much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Stephen.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.